Welcome, everybody, to the Ambition Project Show. I'm your host, Deirdre Sanborn. On this show, I interview ambitious business leaders who share their big ideas and personal experience about how they're making a positive impact at work and in their communities so that you, the listener, may be inspired to do the same. If you like what you hear on the show, subscribe to it on iTunes or on my website at www.theambitionprojectshow.com. Today I'm with Scott Halford. He is an international authority on emotional intelligence and the use of neuroscience in business. Scott is also the best-selling author of Activate Your Brain, How Understanding Your Brain Can Improve Your Work and Your Life. So Scott, thanks for joining me on the show today. And I'm very interested in having you share your insights about your book, Activate Your Brain. But before we go there, I would like to learn more about you.
Okay, well, do you want the dark, dirty parts, or do you want all the polished, shiny off stuff?
Dark, dirty is way more fun.
All right, well, after I was a stripper in college, no, I'm kidding.
Hey now.
Totally joking, totally joking.
Well,
Right, it's the Ambition Project. So my ambitions began in, my first career was in TV, actually, which is an interesting thing for most people because they don't see the jump from TV to how I became a kind of a speaker, writer, educator. And there actually was a very natural thing. In college, I actually competed in speech, and then when I went and got a career, I didn't know that you could speak for a living, so I got into television, just another form of communication, really. And I was there for about 10 years. The last 3 years, my job was to coach and work with anchors and reporters, and then it turned into executives on camera work and being likable and increasing credibility. Then it morphed into coaching people around presentation skills. And in 1990, I went out on my own, started the business, and did a deep dive back into a realm of emotional intelligence, and then really began working so much in the area of medicine and science that all of those people, they wanted the brain science behind it. So went back to school, studied the brain, and here we are today. So that's how I am, yeah. Been 26 years, though, since I started my own business, which is really kind of cool. It's kind of fun.
Yeah, I could tell you're having fun.
Yeah.
So let me ask you, were you always naturally outgoing and gregarious as a kid?
Well, I think I had to be. I mean, I'm number 5 of 7 children. And so in order to be seen, I had to, hey, I had to be a little bit wacky, I think. Who knows, how that all came out. But certainly I've always been the one being told to shut my mouth.
Well, well, it's funny because as you point out in some of your books and the talks that you give, your upbringing has an influence on who you are and who you become, but you can choose who you end up being in the world, in effect. Mm-hmm. So I'm wondering, from your own perspective, your own personal perspective, what percentage of who you are today and what you've chosen as a career is a part and parcel to your genetics and your upbringing and to your choosing?
Yeah. Well, it's the $1 million question right now. Social scientists and behavioral neuroscientists really look at kind of what the genetic encoding is. And then back in the 80s, we did the whole genomic study with twins, trying to figure out with identical twins, looking at DNA and looking at kind of what behavioral attributes come through the genes. And things like aggression. We know that is a genetically based behavior. We know things like happiness are also there's a set range there.
Is that true?
Yep. There's a set range with happiness, and the good news is that you actually have about a 40% chance to change it if you wish. So that's huge from a behavioral standpoint. I mean, even if you had a 10% chance, that's enough for you to actually jump in there and do something. So having a 40% chance to be able to work on yourself, even from the genetic component, is really huge. I think a lot of people think that genes are a determinant of your life. Now, they might be of your color and your hair color and your eye color and your skin and certainly maybe certain diseases, but it's not for behavior. They really are considered to be just a suggestion. And the suggestion says that if you pile on to that genetic encoding, you're actually going to create behavioral repetition, and it will be something you master. The unfortunate thing is that you could be mastering something negative like aggression. If you don't do anything with it, you can let it go extinct or become dormant and replace it with something else. And that's a good thing if it is a negative, kind of a negative behavioral aspect like aggression. So I tell a story about some twins. I was in television for a while. Do you want me to tell that?
This is a really great story.
Yeah, well, so it was several years ago when I was in TV and I was doing a documentary on capital punishment and interviewing a number of people in death rows across the country. And one of the guys I met at Florida State Penitentiary was in a gene study, and he was an identical twin. An amazing, amazing story. He was there obviously for having committed a very heinous and brutal crime, and that resulted in murder. And he was interviewed and asked a lot of questions about his life and, just things in general. And they asked him, why is it that you believe that you ended up in this place in your life? And he said, well, that's easy, because when I was growing up, me and my brother, we lived with my single daddy, and he didn't have a job, and he abused drugs, alcohol, and us every single day. And we got broken bones. We would run from him. He got bloody, just beat us. And in order to survive, I learned to hit back. And this is what you get. You get this very violent man. So that's how he explained himself. And then they went and interviewed his brother, who was an investment banker in Raleigh, North Carolina. Completely different life.
Wow.
And they asked him the same question, and he answered it about the same way. Growing up, single father, no job, abused drug, alcohol, and us every day. We got beaten, and then we went to kindergarten. He continued the story. And when we were put into school for the very first time in kindergarten, we were deemed too violent to be in the same class together. So they separated us. And one day I was on the playground beating the life out of this kid, just smashing his face into the gravel, when my teacher came upon me, and she was so angry because she was watching me do this, and she went to grab me, and I did to her what I would do to any adult grabbing me in anger, and that is I kicked her as hard as I can, scraped off skin off of her shin, and now she was really mad. So she reached down, she picked me up, I'm kicking, I'm screaming, she held my legs in, held my arms in, basically bear hugged me into her body, and she just whispered in my ear, she said, stop, we're not doing this anymore. When you're hurt, we hug. We're not going to hit anymore. That doesn't work. I know you get really, really angry. And here's what I want you to do. When you walk into class every morning, I want you to come and find me, and I want you to give me a hug. That's how I want you to start out your day. And when you're sitting in the classroom and you start to get mad, and I know you do because I watch you, I don't care what time it is, I don't care what we're doing, get up out of your seat, come up and give me a hug, and I'll give you one right back. And that's what we're going to do from now on. And at first, all the kids thought he was a weird little thing, and then they became the hugging class, of course. Well, that little episode basically expresses the whole idea of gene predetermination, that while he might have had an aggressor gene, he was able to be put on to and take a different road and actually become a different person, whereas his brother just laid right into his gene expression. And so, it's an important thing to look at, because we have gene strengths too that we ignore. So you could be really great at something, but you just decide, I don't have the time or what have you. You ignore them. And so life is very wonderful and complex, and we want to look at both sides of that equation and understand you can choose who you want to be. You just have to do some work around it.
So what I hear you saying is that you're never truly a victim of circumstance, that you have some control over those circumstances.
You do. It's not easy. I mean, to peddle it as easy would not be right on my part. It's not easy. There are people who really struggle with anger and other issues every day of their life. And they're successful because they've learned not to be angry, but to express anger. And that's a whole different thing. Being angry is scary to watch. Throwing things through windows, pounding on tables, screaming and yelling, right? That's being angry. Expressing anger is to say, I am so mad right now.
Right.
We can get away with that. But so people struggle with that. And the idea is that, there are better ways to manage some of the difficult things. And there's some really great ways to actually pile on top of the positive things. But again, there has to be an awareness that comes with it.
Absolutely. So how does this relate to the work that you do with business leaders in the workplace?
Well, the arena that I work in is pretty high level executives, and really getting to the place of, and I think it needs to happen earlier, quite frankly, is really getting to the place of understanding what is my impact. You know, when I walk into a room, how do I feel to the place? How do I feel to other people? How am I impacting people? And am I choosing that impact? Am I living by default or am I living by design? And I think a lot of people live by default. They live at they're prey to their own mammal brain, the emotional part of the brain. And so my job and my goal is to work with people on getting really incredibly aware of themselves from moment to moment. And that awareness is difficult because sometimes we look at ourselves and go, oh, look at that, not so good. I mean, if you've ever said something where as you were hearing it come out of your mouth, you're like, oh, let's reel that one back. um, you know, you're pretty much at the mercy of some really pretty instinctual things. Sometimes they're not so good. But being aware of it helps us to actually be more involved with not doing the things we don't want to and doing more of what we do want to. So I'm really big into the whole idea of it. With awareness, you can have huge impact on people's lives. You can create inspiration. You can make better decisions. You can absolutely focus yourself better. And so that awareness is really critical. We just don't do enough awareness work early on. It should be required.
Well, obviously we're all intensely human, which means we're imperfect. And certainly there are a lot of practices out there that can help us get more in tune with ourselves so that we gain awareness. I noticed the Buddha on the wall behind you, and there's certainly meditation practices that help build awareness. And there's also just having compassion for yourself when you make a mistake and then come back and instead seeing that as a negative or a mark on your personality, see as an opportunity to learn and grow, right? Yes. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I think we're rougher on ourselves than anyone else, and we have, there's the whole perfectionism syndrome, and people laugh and they're like, oh yeah, I'm a perfectionist, and I want to say to them, do you realize that that's now in the DSM, the Diagnostic Manual for Mental Maladies? It's actually not something.
Wow, is that true?
Yes, it is, absolutely, because it's a syndrome that actually increases kind of it creates an emotional instability. It's anxiety, so there's a neuroticism to it. And right. The fact is it's a personality trait that says, I'm going to go after something for the rest of my life that is unattainable. So the rest of your life, you put yourself in this anxious prison. And so, yeah, it's really kind of paying attention to the idea that we need to be compassionate with ourselves. We are going to interrupt ourselves and interrupt our lives more than anyone else ever will. We have like 70,000 thoughts a day that have the potential to interrupt us. And so when we start to look at our effectiveness, we have to understand our hand in it, the world's hand in it, and then at the same time be compassionate. What's the race for? I mean,
that's right.
So what if we're a little off or a little this? I mean, here I am in my gym shirt. Thank you for letting me wear it.
You look fabulous.
I asked Deirdre before we started. She's going to put this on tape, and I'm like, oh, I've got my.
It shows your realness, your humanness.
I got my gym shirt on. She's like, hey, you're living the life. And you know what? That's the thing, is that you just decide. Probably at one point in my life, I would like, oh, hold on, I got to go get on a bow tie and tux. But but I think that being compassionate with ourselves and understanding that we are unfinished human beings until the day we're dead, and that the life is not about getting it once and for all. Because you don't, it's like eating once and for all. You can't do.
Yeah. Well, we're all works in progress, right?
Yeah.
I had someone say to me recently, pressure is an inside job. So a lot of times when we see ourselves as perfectionists, there's a rigidity or a lack of flexibility that comes with being a perfectionist. And having the willingness to have compassion for yourself and others creates a form of malleability or flexibility and an ability to adapt and learn to situations.
Right, 100%. Mm-hmm. I agree with that. And I think, the true, I think, quest of most people, quite frankly, my own opinion, but I have had a lot of experience with watching people strive in the striving of their lives at different points in their lives, that we all just want to know how and where we matter. And that we want to matter somehow, and we want people to see us and have them notice us.
Right.
And to see that we matter. And when somebody doesn't notice that we did something really great and we expect them to notice that, conflict ensues. Think about relationships where you come home at the end of the day and you begin a conversation. Hey, honey, guess what happened? They're like, well, I've had a bad day. Well, boom. There's no acknowledgement of the cool, guess what happened? And all we want to do is have people just notice us. And we can really take care of a lot of the issues in our life if we begin to understand that I want to matter, but so do you. And we need to make time for both of that in our lives. And being effective with other employees and with the people we love and our friends boils down to that, I think.
Well, let's talk about that, because I think on one hand you're saying that ambition or the desire to be seen can sometimes create a situation where you feel unappreciated or unseen. But you're saying that if you can see that the other person's looking for that same thing, that there's a meeting ground there. Did I hear you correctly?
Yeah. So it's life is a dance, and you're never going to, wherever your ambitions take you. You won't succeed unless you do the dance with someone else. We work best. Our species works best with others of our species. That's how we survived. We would never have made it out of the caves if we didn't have other people looking out for us. And we evolved that way. Our brains evolved that way. And so when I look at the typical ambitious entrepreneur, they all typically are the solopreneur. I'm going to go do it by myself. And statistically and traditionally, those aren't the people who succeed. The ones who succeed are those who do it with other people and other people who value them. And that value comes from that dance back and forth of saying, I see you, you see me, we blend together. I don't do what you do, you don't do what I do. Together we make a whole. And you complete me. And so
you complete me.
Yes.
Well, tell me a little bit more about this. This is the first time I've heard this said about people succeeding in community. And I'm a big believer in community, which is one of the reasons why I initiated this podcast show, is because I'd like to draw leaders together in community around big ideas. So in this case, you're saying it's a validated fact that we go a lot further. There's a saying, we may go faster alone, but we go farther together.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit more about, you say statistically speaking, about that dynamic.
Well, there are, one of the books I would recommend people to read is called The Wisdom of the Crowds. And I can't quote the author off the top of my brain, but because it's one of those ones with Z's and Y's and W's and X's in it. But
Wisdom of the Crowds. Okay.
No vowels in it. And that's a great place to start on looking at this kind of thing, but really understanding that there's no one genius in the world who is smarter than an average group of people on the same topic. So if you get a group of people who are average on the topic and you actually have them work together on an issue and you take one genius, the group will always outperform the one genius.
That resonates with an earlier interview I had with Steven Shapiro, where he was talking about the importance of diversity. So having different experiences. And he was also saying that expertise, or maybe you could see it as perfection, is kind of goes against the grain of innovation. So in a way, there's this continuing theme of the importance of community and looking at things from different perspectives. Would you agree?
Yeah. I think Stephen probably is alluding to on the expert part is that, when we call ourselves an expert, we basically say we're done. We're done. I'm an expert. I'm done. I've got everything. And so I really don't like that word, actually. I like expertise. But being an expert connotes to a lot of people, there's nothing else for me to learn. So when you get experts in the room, they all fight to validate what they already know and how. I think if you have people who are subject matter experts or subject matter non-experts, that they have expertise in an arena, and you bring them together, that diversity of mind brings up a whole another group of thinking, because in neuroscientific math, it really doesn't add up. 1 + 1 does not add up to 2. There's you, That's
Yeah.
one. There's me. That's two.
Right.
And then what it creates when we're in the room is a third thing, and that third thing is us.
Yeah.
And we are neurochemically different just from being in each other's presence. Well, now I add another person in, and now we've magnified the group even differently. Take one person out, and it changes. So the idea of getting the right people in the room to think about things and to create a place where it is okay to be diverse and thinking differently, you create huge genius. And so then your ambitions can be realized as opposed to trying to do everything yourself. I had to learn that lesson myself. So it's a critically important one, I think.
So it's the amplification of thought. It's 1 + 1 = 3. 3 plus whatever is, who knows,
Yep.
something squared or.
It's exponential.
Right.
It's exponential.
Okay.
Yeah, and the sad thing I think about our culture, and I'm talking the Western culture, is we're a we culture. Me. We're a me culture because even though we went in the 80s and went to Japan and said, wow, how come they're beating the heck out of us in the car industry, and went, whoa, they're working in teams and they're
Right.
actually working together doing different things in a team, and we came back and imported that here and tried to do the team thing. Doesn't work very well, quite frankly, and the reason it doesn't is because we still reward through the me. Pick me. I'm the one who had the idea.
Right.
And so that's who we reward. We don't reward in teams. So we're really a very individualistic society, and it permeates how we operate. And I would love to see that change a little bit, even if it's just philosophically, to say, I need the best team around me. Nobody's a boss. We all do a different thing. We literally are self-directed, and we all have a different strength. My business partner is my business partner in this business. She doesn't do what I do. I don't do what she does. And together, we create a whole business. It's perfect.
Do you have any recommendations on how that behavior can be driven in the workplace around supporting teams and incentivizing them toward working together as a team?
Well, yeah, I think, from a lot of cultures would not allow just a lump sum check to be paid to a team. So that's probably not going to happen anytime soon. But from a more just leadership style, one of the things that I think is really critically important for teams is every single time there's a new person put on the team, that dynamic changes. Mm-hmm. And what we have to do is reintroduce the team to itself so that they understand that the chemistry's going to be different.
Right.
It feels very unsafe when you add a new person because who is this person? What job do they want? So on and so forth. And creating context. And that is, if I'm a leader and you're on my team and that person, and we get together and we sit around, I'm going to have those discussions that, especially for a new team, to say, so Deirdre, tell us a little bit about your background and what is it that you bring in terms of IT, because our department's on IT. What's your experience? And then we go to Scott. Scott, what's your experience in IT? Oh, well, I came to it from this way. And we begin to see that the puzzles fit really differently and that you do this and I do this and they do this. And a great leader brings that out in all of the people and everyone understands it. There's no confusion of context.
So you suggest being very intentional each time the group dynamic changes about learning what the differences, strengths are of each team member in order to amplify that benefit?
100%. Context is captain for a team.
Yep.
So if I feel like I'm replicating what you're doing, I will compete with you to win.
Interesting.
If I feel like what I'm doing is adjunct to yours, there might be some overlap, but it's a great article that I'll have you read. It's called iPencil. The letter I.
Okay.
Comma pencil.
iPencil.
Okay. iPencil, and it's all written. It's an essay that was written in 1958 by a guy named Lawrence Reed, R-E-A-D, and he wrote it basically from the mindset of a pencil. It says, I am a pencil. This is my avocation, my vocation. It's all that I do. I'm a simple pencil, and there is not one person in the entire world who knows how to make me. And it goes on to say, because there's the lumberjack who cuts down the trees. There's the people who will cart off all the lumber. There are the miners getting the graphite out for the pencil. There are the castor bean farmers to create the lacquer on the outside. There's the metal and the rubber. And I think that that's so true of any great organization. It's just you have to figure out what part of the pencil do you bring. But the pencil wouldn't be a pencil unless we had your part.
Right.
And when people understand that you need me, I don't need to compete with you, We need to talk to each other because my rubber's not going to fit into your metal band unless it's done correctly. Then we begin to have teams that absolutely soar together.
Are more cohesive. I actually do work with teams in terms of just doing that, is getting them to work more cohesively together. And one of the first things that we focus on is the element of trust, which is the foundation of building that cohesiveness. And it's sort of like the way we began this interview, in that trust begins when you understand the person more personally, like what's their background, where it creates a commonality. And as like touchy-feely as that may seem at times, I think it's so important. I mean, I would say it's essential to have an understanding of, I mean, you don't have to get in the deepest, darkest, like dirtiest fears or whatever of each person, but a general understanding of, hey, what's your background? What drives you? What motivates you? Hey, I do too, or wow, that's interesting, that type of thing. Would you agree?
Yeah, for sure. Sandy Pentland, who is a man, Sandy Pentland, Pentland. Again, I don't have the name of his book at the tip of my tongue, but I would encourage you to read his. He's out of MIT, and he's a social psychologist and looks at what makes groups smarter. One of the things that he does that makes groups smarter, one of the things he looks at are three things that makes a group smarter. Number one is the even distribution of taking turns in a group. So if a group is dominated by one person, they're not as smart as a group where they're very, very deliberate about everybody taking turns. The second thing is the degree to which the team knows each other outside of the topic of work. Yeah, which is really interesting. And the third thing is a gender split, 60-40 women to men. They're a little bit smarter in
Really?
in new groups. And that's because women at baseline are better at number one and two. They're more collaborative at baseline. Men are more competitive. And at baseline, women are more social. Men are, we'll talk about the weather and sports when they meet each other. So the part about being social is not touchy-feely. It's kind of like, you know, when you go and you hang out with your work pals outside of work and you talk about the kids or a raft trip that you went on or a ski trip, you go on a vacation, all of a sudden when you're having to run up a hill, a work hill, and you got to get to the top and nobody really knows why we're doing it, when we trust each other, and we trust each other because we know each other, we're not going to ask for a lot of data. Why are we doing this? We just know that we know each other. So that's an absolutely incredibly important elixir. Trust is, I mean, without it, you just can't get anywhere.
Trust and diversity. And so this diversity initiative thing that a lot of companies are starting to adopt, there's actually some statistical validity in that.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and you want diversity of mind, diversity of gender, diversity.
That's right. So not just like 60, we must have 60% women or 60% whatever, cultural diversity. I think what you're saying is just true diversity in the ranks on many levels.
Yeah, you get richness that is beyond anything you would get if you got all white women or all white men in a room.
Right. So I think it's really important to turn to your book, your latest book called Activate Your Brain. Maybe you could tell us a little bit more about some of the key points in the book that are important for business leaders to understand.
Yeah, I'm real excited about this one. It took off like wildfire. It came out last May and hit the Wall Street Journal in September. Its list in September, and only because it feels like I'm bragging, but I'm really not, because I didn't expect it, except for I think people are really interested in their brain.
Right.
And I think they're interested in their brain because we're watching our parents, and it's not good news a lot. And we don't want to be that. And I think as we move along, we begin to look at how can we begin to take care of our brains. We spend more money on our car than we do our brain and our body every year. And I think... I
never thought of it that way, Scott.
I know, it's kind of...
It's like, wow.
It's not
in
good.
Perspective.
I know. And so I think the book really highlights how do you get all the things that you want. You want stamina. You want focus. You want to get more effective. You want to be able to make better decisions. You want to be able to interact with people more effectively. And all of that is born out of your brain. And if you don't have, number one, a great understanding of how it operates, number two, how you operate when your brain is at its best and when it's not, and we all have different rhythms. And number three, if you are constantly abusing it, by not sleeping, by not eating properly, by not exercising properly. You are, all of those things that we talked about that you want, the stamina, the energy, the focus, decision making, so on and so forth, they're all going to suffer. And you will actually, in the meantime, be the victim of a shrinking brain. And our brains shrink anyway.
Right.
From the time we're about 30, 25 to 30, the brain stops its growth. And then we're all now for those of us at 30 or over, we're on that slow shrink down to decay. But it doesn't have to happen as rapidly as it once did, because we now know how often the brain needs breaks. We now know how much sleep we actually need, how much exercise we actually need. And all of these things that we pay attention to in the book, sleep, food, exercise, learning how to really work your attentional control, working your emotional intelligence, really figuring out what your stressors are, understanding what the stressor hormones are and what the positive stressor hormones do. When you can begin to live life a lot more deliberately, and it's not like living through a textbook, you do things physiologically like plump your hippocampus, the place where we store our memories, and the frontal lobes of our head that allow us to think deeply and quickly well into old age. And we kind of, we literally affect our overall well-being because we're not living in a swill of negative neurochemistry that's just depressing us and eating our brain and our body at the same time, literally.
Well, Scott, it all seems kind of overwhelming in a way because it's like, oh, well, I have to exercise and eat right, but now, like, I need to exercise my brain and, most people like some easy type of cheat sheet or some fact list that they could check off. Do you have any basic recommendations for people to help them continue to build on their brain capacity, or at least prevent the shrinkage, if you will?
Yeah, and everybody does. They want the pill, and there is no pill. And if you want the life that most people want, you've got to be disciplined about it. And it's not easy, but it's not difficult, right? It's simple, but complex, meaning that you have to put the time in. So things like 150 minutes per week of exercise that's faster than a walk, where you break out into a little sweat, right? Cardiovascular, nothing grows new neurons and creates neuroplasticity in the brain where the neurons actually can connect like cardiovascular exercise. It secretes something in your brain called BDNF, brain-derived neurotropic factor, and it's called Miracle-Gro. It literally helps the brain grow. So 150 minutes a week. 8 hours of sleep, literally that 7 to 9 hour sweet thing that is the sweet spot. You see people who go, oh, I get 5 hours or 6 hours because I'm really running hard. And like, good, you're probably crankier, you probably make worse decisions, and you're probably tired all the time. And here's the big thing. We know that the lack of sleep leads to inflammation in the brain. Inflammation is what we consider to be the precursor for dementia and other memory-related diseases that become permanent. You gotta sleep, all right?
That'll stop you in your tracks right there.
It'll stop you in the tracks. Go in the book, read about where how and where and when you can get it, and really start to measure how much you actually need. There's techniques and ways to do that. So we need that 7 to 9 hour sweet spot as an adult human being. There are the freaks of nature who get away with 5 or 6 and get all of their slow wave cycles in. Not very many. There are the freaks of nature who need over 10 hours of sleep and it doesn't affect their mood level. But if you sleep too long, most of us, it affects a neurohormone called serotonin, and we get up and we're like, why am I so tired? I slept for so long. You ever have that where you feel like really tired after sleeping long? So you've affected a neurohormone in your body. The other things are the brain needs to be fed about every hour and a half if you want it to be on. About every hour and a half to 2 hours, it needs glucose, whether you're hungry or not. So people keep skipping breakfast or lunch. You are doing your brain the biggest disservice. And in that, we need complex carbohydrates, not simple. So anything that is manufactured is probably something you don't want to put in your mouth a lot. Now and again, obviously you may, but complex carbohydrates, nuts, berries, fruits, vegetables, right, that kind of thing. And we need it throughout the day because your glucose is what operates your brain. And if you don't have it, you're going to get cranky, and again, you're going to have bad decisions. So look at yourself later on in the day. Are you fueling? Because you're going to start getting tired. We look at things like awake rest, what we call awake rest. That's a simple one. 3 10-minute breaks a day where you untether yourself from your phone and your computer. You literally put those away, walk outside, or just stare out the window, or go lock yourself somewhere else, or go play a game if you're going to be in technology, play something completely different. We know that that is a wake rest, 3 10-minute opportunities a day, reset the cortisol, the negative neurohormones in your brain. And then finally, the research is really, really very robust around the perfect time to actually be sitting and working. The brain works best in sprints, and it can sprint for about 57 minutes. Sprint, just, and then needs about 17 minutes rest. So you go and you get distracted, go do some awake rest, go sit, go hang out in nature. You can meditate, you can just get quiet, take a nap, read something funny, but it needs a break from what you were just doing. In my book, I call it the 50-10 because it's easier to work in an hour. So the 50-10, 50 sprint, 10 down, 50 sprint, 10 down. So those are relatively simple, and I call them erasers. They're erasing the stress response. You got to do some of those every day. Every day. It's not I'm going to wait till the weekend. No.
You know what? This is actually very validating for me because I find when I get up in the morning, I'm a morning person. Not everybody is, but I could get a lot done in that 1 hour of time. And if I dedicate myself to doing other things, while I love to exercise in the morning, sometimes I'm really at my peak performance first thing. And then the other thing is I find that I can't keep my attention, right? And so that's been labeled as being ADD or whatever, but maybe it's just a cycle, like a sleep cycle or wake sleep cycle. It's like I could be on here, I need to be off here, on, off. So,
Yeah.
I thought that was unique to me. Perhaps there was something wrong, but it's great to know that that's actually a pattern of efficiency.
We're living in a disruptible society where we are disrupted throughout the day, plus the 70,000 thoughts that can interrupt us that we have.
Right.
Add all that on, and everybody thinks they have ADD. They don't have attentional deficit disorder. They have attentional disruption disorder.
I think this is a really big point, Scott, right here.
Yeah, I agree. I think I wrote about it in the Huffington blog. So it's the thing that I think is happening is that we're not turning off all the things that can pop up, right? It's like squirrel. Like right now, my desktop, as I'm talking to you, my desktop on my computer, everything's off so that nothing is popping up. And
Yes.
the only thing, because otherwise I'd be doing this the whole time.
Exactly.
I'm looking down, actually, I'm every once in a while looking down to see what I look like in the picture at the corner. Should I fit the screen kind of thing.
Do I look
But-
good? Oh, yes, I look good.
Well, good is not what I ever think about because I know that's not the case. But the point is that when we got pop, 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 right? The squirrel, 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 squirrel.
Right.
Of course we're going to be distracted. We like shiny pennies. We like stuff that comes into our focal point. And here's the thing, and I talk about this in the book, is that 1 hour of focus time, if you can learn how to do it, and again, we're talking about the 50-minute neuroscientific hour, 1 hour of focus time equals about 4 hours of distracted time. So if you learn to focus, you'll get done more in 2 hours than you did in an entire day. But learning to focus it's a skill. You have to dedicate yourself to it. So when people say, I want something easy to learn to do, it's very simple to learn how to actually give yourself attentional control. It's very difficult to stay disciplined to it.
So
gotta do
give
it.
me an example of that, or how do people learn attentional control?
So through things like mindfulness, in a workshop, I speak in corporations all over the world. I do a workshop where we use a raisin. They put a raisin in their mouth, and I actually detail this in the book. Put a raisin in their mouth. It's gonna be there for 90 seconds. They can't keep time. The raisin has to be constantly in motion. At the end of the 90 seconds, they have to have some remnant of the raisin left over in their mouth.
Actually sounds a little gross, Scott.
Yeah, it's a little disgusting. So I have to have control of the raisin. And we do 2 exercises like that. The first time I ask them, I say, all right, you're going to put the raisin in your mouth, 90 seconds, don't keep time. Got to have some remnant of the raisin left over at the end of 90 seconds. The only thing you can think about is anything but the raisin. And so they let their mind wander. They notice how difficult it is because that raisin's in their mouth. That's kind of like people walking by, pop-ups. They're all right there. Learning to control that is really critically important, and allowing themselves to wander. That's called the default mode network. That's the wandering network. It's where creativity happens. Attentional control happens in the second network. Same activity, 90 seconds, remnant of raisin, done when it's still there when you're done. And the only thing you can think about is the raisin this time, the second time. And you know how hard it is for people not to, they're going and they're chewing, they're like, raisin, they're sweet. Is that bad for your teeth? I need to go to the dentist. Right? Do you see how, right? We're all, and it's this constant pull. And it's only 90 seconds, and people pull away from the focus of the raisin on average every 5 to 7 seconds. So we're that easily distractible. So learning to stay controlled on the raisin, and it could be a flame, it could be an almond, it could be, you can do it a lot of different ways. We just start with the raisin. Any mindfulness is what that is. Putting in mind, filling your mind full of what you want it filled with, teaches you how to stay focused, because focus is one of those things. It's two things. It's inhibitory and excitatory in the brain. It's excitatory because I'm saying, look at this. That excites the neurons, right? It says, do this. But it also says, don't do this. It inhibits. It says, don't look at all the things that are trying to get your attention. The intersection of those two, that hard work between those two, has been found to actually grow the frontal lobes, increase the thickness of the gray matter of our because that atrophies as we age, and then that hippocampus in the middle of the brain that stores our memories. And that comes from awake rest and learning how to do it. And unfortunately, or fortunately, you have to get to the place where you're able to do it for 45 minutes a day. You can break it up into different pieces. But it's hard work to keep that brain intact. It is, but you can, and you're gonna be doing something anyway. Why not begin to fill your day with a few minutes here and there?
True, and if it means, like, for the longer term, one, you maintain your brain capacity. It's sort of like growing a muscle, right? Or exercising a muscle. It's doing the same thing for your brain, so you could live a longer, healthier life.
Yep.
On all levels, intellectually, physically. I mean,
that's it. You don't want to just have a body at the end of it all.
No.
You want your brain to be available too. Yeah.
Well, this is interesting because I didn't think that activate your brain was really going to be a conversation about how to live more holistically in a way. I mean, we talk about exercise, we're talking about eating, we're talking about focus and concentration, which oftentimes comes back to like meditation or mindfulness, and so this in a way validates the importance of how living in a very balanced way is very important for optimal performance at work and in all aspects of your life.
Yeah, I mean, and it really does take a look at, if you're going to manage those stressor hormones that will literally eat your body away and batter your immune system, which leads to cancer and myelin sheath diseases and gut disease and aging. And we really look at the science behind it. I mean, the brain is so suggestible. It's such a sensitive little imp. It says, tell me what you want to do, and I will work to the nth degree to do it. Well, we overload it. And it works so hard to give us what we want, and then eventually it just says, I can't do it all. And it just shuts down, and we fall down. We fall into exhaustion because the brain's eating all this glucose. Your brain eats 25% of all of the available glucose in your brain, in your body. And your brain's only 2% of your total body weight.
Wow.
So it is
incredible.
It's hungry. So when you are stressing, every time you stress, you're eating glucose because cortisol and glucose travel together to deal with the stressors. So we want to manage ourselves better. And, no one ever gave us a manual for our brain. And many people work out, and that benefits the brain. But if you begin to really think about what the brain needs, there are some extra things above and beyond the exercising in a gym. And it needs, we think, I work out every day. Well, how do you deal with your stress? I work out every day for 2 hours in the morning. Great. What happens when that poop parachute comes into your office and lands in the middle of the day?
Poop parachute.
Right? Just, what happens then? And, how are you able to manage your stressors then, because that exercise benefit is worn off? And certainly you might have reset your cortisol at that point in the day, but we need to revisit it throughout the day. And so we need to have more adaptive things that we can grab to throughout the day that aren't a big deal. That are literally get up, walk away, go drink water. Your brain needs about 10 times more water than other body cells.
Right.
Go take a walk and drink water. And so we're all really afraid to do or think about kind of how basic the needs are for the brain. They are basic. There are 5 or 6 things we want to pay attention to every day, but it's every day. And your brain is never going to take a break until later. And when it does, all things are going to be lost. What you want to do is give your brain a fighting chance, and pretty much it doesn't take a break. You shouldn't either. You got to pay attention to it every single day.
Well, that helps you, to get back to your original point, maintain control, stay focused, and have stamina, right?
Yep.
Each one of those things.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I look at people who are tired, and I'm like, okay, well, tell me about the stressors in your life, What are you managing? Because your brain's eating glucose somewhere, and that, think about when you're really hungry. Have you ever had that low blood sugar hungry?
Yeah, I call it hangry.
Yeah, hangry. Know how you get? You get really angry, you get cranky. That's what your brain's doing.
Yeah.
If you're not feeding yourself, you're not taking care of it. Your brain eventually just shuts down. And I have 2 brothers who are type 1 diabetics, and they are the perfect examples of what happens when low blood sugar hits. We can see them. I mean, they become uncommunicative. They can't think. They become really grumpy, and we go like, oh, Doug, need a little candy bar or something, right? We're looking for fast sugar in a diabetic situation. But for the rest of us who are not diabetic, we want to actually give ourselves a nice, slow, complex carbohydrate drip. One of the worst things to come along, in my opinion, the longest time, where the advice that people, I think, took wrongly, but for all the diets that said cut out carbohydrates and then slowly add them back in, and people were wholesale cutting them out.
Wow.
And, so we had a bunch of skinny, dumb people roaming around, right? Right? So you'll get skinny, but you can't think. So you need the complex carbohydrates, and I think most of those diets would acknowledge that you need the complex ones.
Yes.
But people were wholesale cutting them out, and it's dangerous. You want to get rid of this. And the easy way to think of it, simple are things that are man-made. There's a quick uptake into your brain and then a quick dispersion of them, and then they're gone. And they play with your islet cells. They mess with your insulin. Not good. The slow tick is what your brain wants to handle. Those come through, through fruits, vegetables, fish, meat, even, all the things that we kind of need on a regular basis. So we want to pay.
And they're part of a healthy diet.
Healthy diet. It's if you're gonna be an ambitious go-getter, kind of get out there and become a hardcore entrepreneur, I will just say this: you want to begin to look at yourself like you're an Olympic athlete, and an Olympic athlete would no more
Absolutely.
not take care of all of those things than you should, because your tool is your brain. It's not your legs and your arms and your muscles. It's your brain, and every single day, taking care like an Olympic athlete would, put you on that same thing. I don't know very many effective people who live a really intensely, unhealthy life every once in a while, but then they die.
Well, it gives you longevity. It gives you stamina, and makes you just a better person to be with too. More enjoyable.
Yeah, your well-being. You just feel in a much better mood for sure. Yeah.
Well, you've been an incredible resource here today, and you've definitely given us several other resources to look at. You had mentioned the Huffington Post article. Do you remember what that is? And if not, you could share the link with us afterward, and I'll include it.
So, if they just go and Google my name, Scott, with 2 T's, Halford, Halford, they'll see all the articles I wrote. I've also written for Entrepreneur Online. They could do the same thing. Just go to entrepreneur.com and huffingtonpost.com and just put my name in, and you'll see all my articles. So I write about the brain, and I write about its impact on our daily living.
That's great. And then I ask all my guests if they have a favorite ambition quote that they like to share with the guests. Do you have one that you can share with us today?
Yeah, I don't think it's fair. It's a quote for myself, which sounds...
Hey, that works. Whatever works.
I stumbled across it one time in a workshop, and I went, huh, and everybody peeked up, and we decided that it might be accurate. And what I say is this, is the degree to which you keep your agreements with yourself is the degree to which your life will work.
Explain that a little bit more.
Yeah, it's about, we keep agreement. We have agreements all day long. Oh, I'm going to go exercise. Oh, I'll call you. Oh, I'll go do this. I mean to do this. I'm going to pick up this.
Yep.
You look at when your life falls apart, it's that you're not keeping these agreements. You're not following through. And when the brain gets overloaded from the messiness, it can't follow through. And so really living a life that allows you to keep your agreements makes you be congruent, makes you be trustworthy, because the brain looks for consistency, and that's part of trust, is consistent behavior over time equals trust. So you become consistent. If you say you're going to call me, you actually call me, right? It's not just kind of the maybe.
You know what? That's a huge issue I have lately with people. I don't know if it's the ADD thing or it's this shiny object syndrome, but being in your integrity really, I think, is a unique quality these days. And to truly be in your integrity is a sign of a very ambitious person who knows what they're about. So I would agree with you in that perspective.
Yeah. So I think that's where the degree to which you keep your agreements with yourself is the degree to which your life will work, plays out. So look at your agreements. If you're not going to keep them, get them off your list. If you can't keep them, tell me, and then that works. But don't just let them pass by you or anyone else and decide, oh, I just couldn't make it. And then, just doesn't work for your credibility, and your brain begins to accept the fact that about half the time that I say I'll do something, I'll do it, and that's okay. That's not okay. Not for an ambitious person.
No. So my mission with this show is to spread big ideas from ambitious leaders like yourself, and I always like to ask my guests if they know of anybody that they would recommend and can introduce me to be on the show next time as a guest. Is there anybody that you would recommend?
You might check out Matt Tenney.
Matt Tenney.
Wrote the book, The Mindfulness Edge.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it just came out. He and Tim Gard, a neuroscientist, wrote the book called The Mindfulness Edge.
Yes, Tim Gard, of course. Okay, great.
The neuroscientist. So one or both of those guys would be great.
Okay.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for being on the show today. And before we go, I'd really like to know and have the guests be aware of all the incredible resources that you have to offer. So where can they find you and buy your books if they're interested?
So my website is CompleteIntelligence.com, CompleteIntelligence.com. They can find me at Scott, with 2 T's, at CompleteIntelligence.com. And you can go to Amazon or your favorite bookseller online and order the book. It's in both ebook format and hard book format. So there you go.
Excellent. Well, it's been so fun having you on the show today, and I believe you're giving away 3 to 5 free copies of your book.
We got 3 books here. Yeah, you'll definitely want one of these.
Hold it up so we can see. Activate your brain. Yes. Excellent. And and you said that was a Wall Street Journal bestseller.
That's right.
So you got to get on that, folks.
Get on it.
All right. Well, you can find everything that Scott talked about today, including links to the great articles, the books that he mentioned, by going to www.theambitionprojectshow.com. You could also find us on iTunes. And while you're there, please make sure to leave a comment and provide some feedback on what you found helpful about this episode today. Scott, it's been an incredible pleasure to have you with us, and you've been a great resource for ambitious leaders like yourself and me.
Awesome.
Yeah. Well, stay ambitious and get out there and make the world a better place. Thank you for joining us today.